Hey, welcome back to Subbrief. Today we're going to take a moment to talk about the Russian naval visit to Havana, Cuba. The media has really been running wild with this story before she even pulled into port down there. Some of the examples of this was this source that came across my social media somehow, saying that is this Cuban crisis 2.0? And the short answer to that is no. No, it's not. This is simply a Russian Navy port visit that they do routinely. The thing that makes this one special is that they're bringing a nuclear submarine for the first time in a warship for the first time in a couple of years. But Russia has made numerous visits to Cuba going back through the entire Cold War, on and off again. And that was NATO's official response to this, is that this is seen as just a routine transit of a Northern Fleet, Russian Northern Fleet flotilla down to Cuba and presumably back again. The American Navy response was that this is not a threat. This is exercising freedom of navigation in international waters. So this is what we've been saying is okay for years, and we want people to do free, peaceful passage of their warships in international waters, whether it's off the coast of Florida or if it's off the coast of Taiwan. It's all the same in our eyes. But, of course, the American media couldn't help themselves. Here's the Miami Herald quoting a U.S. official, and I have a problem with this. Whenever a news media outlet quotes a U.S. official, they should name that official. We have no idea who this person is, but someone associated officially with the U.S. government has quoted saying, "We are disappointed that Cuba are likely hosting the visiting Russian ships," end quote. And that was obviously before it happened. So I wonder who this official is. Is it a janitor? Is it the president? We don't know. Miami Herald won't tell us. But I did find this. Senator Marco Rubio, who represents Florida, one of the senators for that state, sent this out on Twitter, also called X now. He says, "We haven't had a Russian submarine carrying nuclear-capable missiles operating in the Caribbean in over 30 years. That is factually incorrect. Senator Rubio needs to get an updated brief on recent history." So he also continues to say, "So if the regime in Cuba decides to allow one," referring to the nuclear submarine, "to make a port of call just 90 miles short of 90 miles from our shore, the Biden administration must impose real consequences on them." This is the opposite of the United States and the U.S. Navy's official position and NATO's position, forcing the U.S. government to make a statement saying that there is no threat whatsoever from this flotilla. But because the senator made such a tweet on his own, the Russian media, of course, ran with it with headlines saying the U.S. Senate, as in our entire body, as if it's official policy now, has demanded punishment for Cuba for this. It's just ridiculous, and why the senator should have his phone taken away until he gets an update. And of course, since that Russian news media outlet in Russia posted that, all of their affiliates across Europe, repeated it, and that's what's kind of caused this uproar of, oh my gosh, is this a new Cuban Missile Crisis? No, this is a summer trip for the Russian Navy. It's almost a reward to go to Cuba. Cuba's nice this time of year. So the four ships that are visiting are the Admiral Gorshkov, which is a frigate, and Academic Passion, which is a oil tanker to keep the frigate going, because the frigate doesn't have the endurance to make the trip all the way from the Northern Fleet, which is up around the Kola Peninsula, up where Finland is, all the way down through the North Atlantic to the Cuba without refueling at least once. So they brought a tanker with them. Makes sense. The Nikolai Chaiker is a rescue salvage tug that is along with them in case there are any problems along the way. That is a very long trip with no friendly ports nearby. If anything happens mechanically to these vessels, they're going to need repair. It makes sense to bring a salvage tug. And then finally, the fourth vessel is the Kazan nuclear submarine. That is one of the Yasin-class submarines that we'll talk about in detail in this video. Now, whenever half of your flotilla is support salvage vessels, you're talking about the Russian Navy, because this is how they normally operate. So we've been following, when I say we, I mean the U.S. Navy with the U.S. Coast Guard ship Stone, and even the Canadian Navy, Royal Canadian Navy, joined us in escorting, following, shadowing, whatever word you would like to use, this flotilla zigzagging its way across the North Atlantic before finally heading south near Florida to head to Cuba. And when she did that, VP-8, that's our Patrol and Reconnaissance P-8A Poseidon squadron out of Jacksonville, got involved and had an absolute field day collecting as much intelligence as they could, from radio transmissions to sound signatures. We probably have really good profiles on everybody right now based on the operations that we saw overhead as they transited past Miami. This is a close-up of what that looked like. You can see multiple American vessels kind of behind the flotilla, ushering them south. The Royal Canadian Navy ship was with us. And ironically, I want to point out the Celebrity Reflection ship, which is a cruise ship, managed to get between the U.S. Navy ships and the Russian flotilla. It was in that in-between area, which I don't think is following rules of the road, but I know the people on board that cruise ship got a really good view of some interesting naval operations, something that we haven't seen at this level in a couple of years. So good for them. I do want to point out this ship here. This is a U.S. government vessel. I don't know who this is. So if anybody does, put it in the comments, because I really would be curious. And no, it's not a submarine, okay? It is a surface ship. I just don't know who it is. And so if you do know, put it down there. All right, let's talk about the Admiral Gorshkov. I'm just going to briefly talk about the warship and the submarine here. Admiral Gorshkov has a magazine of 16 missiles, and they can carry a different combination of missiles in there. They also have a gun on the bow that you see here that has a maximum range of 14 nautical miles. On the aft end, they have a helicopter deck for servicing helicopters, and they carry a helicopter with them. They can also shoot torpedoes port and starboard from the ship. And that is really the weapons complement of this small frigate. So the P-800 Onyx missile that you can see here is a supersonic anti-ship missile, but you can also carry the Caliber cruise missile and the hypersonic Zircon cruise missile as well. And they can have a combination of any of those three types of missiles in that 16 VLS, but they'll never have more than a total of 16 missiles in total. All right, let's take a look at the artillery system. This one is pretty advanced. It's very modern. It's centrally controlled from the CIC inside. It is the A192, and it controls both the gun on the bow and all the point defense guns around the ship itself. Here is the gun on the bow, 130 millimeter naval gun. It's a rather large round. Goes out to 14 miles, like I said, but it shoots a number of different types of rounds. It has an air defense round, which is a bit like flak from World War II, where the shell goes out to a range and then burst, either by proximity fused or by timed. There's different ways for that to happen. And those shells only have a range of about 11 nautical miles. And the gun shoots about 30 rounds per minute. And that's the Admiral Gorshkov. That's the frigate. So here is the Kazan nuclear submarine, and this is a very modern and capable nuclear submarine. This is one that I would say is on par with maybe the Virginia-class Block 1, maybe a Block 2, but it is not to be dismissed. This is a significant threat if you're going against this in a military scenario. Do not dismiss the submarine. This is probably the best attack submarine the Russian Navy has. The Kazan can shoot both the Caliber cruise missiles and the Onyx supersonic anti-ship missiles while submerged. The Kazan goes all the way back to 2009 when her keel was laid. She is actually the second Hull 2 of the Yasin class, but she is Hull 1, as I've labeled here, of the Yasin modernized project. And I explain that in a lot more detail in the Yasin subbrief, so please go check that out if you want to learn more about that. Let's move on to 2017, almost 10 years later, when she's actually commissioned, or launched rather. She does 2 years of sea trials, getting all the bugs worked out, where in 2020, she is actually delivered and begins operating in Russia's Northern Fleet. They do have 4 more under construction. These pictures are years old, and so they've made much more progress than you see here. This is essentially pictures from their keel laying ceremony. So they have 2 built. They're working on 4, and they intend to build 2 additional when there's space in this assembly building to build 2 additional. That will bring the total of the Yasen class of submarines to 8 rather, and 7 of those 8 will be the modernized one. Remember, there's the original Hull 1 that is not modernized. And again, I go over that in detail in the subbrief. All right, so we've learned a lot about the Kazan just in the past couple of weeks here as they've made their transit and came really close to our essentially submarine hunting base out of Florida in Jacksonville. And so this has been a great intelligence gathering boon for the U.S. Navy. And that's why I say I think this visit, though politically motivated, is a tactical, maybe even strategic error, because now we have much more complete electronic warfare and sound acoustic profiles of the Admiral Gorshkov and the Kazan. And that giving us that information, I believe, is a mistake by Russia. They should not be doing that. But I'm glad they did, because now we have a much better idea of what these ships are capable of and how they operate. And now that they're in Havana, the reason why I waited to now to make this video is they're fully in what I would call the American trap, the bear trap, if you will. They have to get out of Cuba somehow, and we're going to watch them that entire time. They can do one of 3 things. They can go back home again, directly back to the Northern Fleet. I think that's the most likely thing to happen, but we're still going to follow them and see how they operate. Just to give you an example, that submarine has to come to periscope depth regularly for transmit and communication orders and other housekeeping needs to keep the submarine functional. So we're going to figure out why and when they do those things. And I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but just normal operations is important for us to watch. And they have to normally operate their vessels back to Russia. So we're going to watch those. The second thing that they could do is they could conduct war games in and around Cuba. This would be politically motivated, and I hope they kind of do it because it's going to give us even more information. The third thing that is unlikely, but they could do, is visit Venezuela. Venezuela is an ally of Russia, politically anyway, and a visit down there would not be unheard of. And they're already in the area. Why not go visit Venezuela? So those are 3 things. Go home, go to Venezuela, or conduct a war game before doing one of those other 2 things. All right. And this is, like I said, a great boon for us. I would put this on par with when someone in China decided to send us an Intel gift package via balloon of Chinese military communication equipment and encryption software over the United States. This was great for us, and it was very smart. It was so smart for us to allow this balloon to operate and transmit and take photos while we watched them do it, because we learned how it works. This was a couple of years ago, if you don't remember. Then, after it was done doing that, we shot that sumbitch down and got it. That's right, we took it back to base, where we took it apart. We ripped all the hardware down to components, looked at the software, what was remaining of it, and I figured out a lot about how that type of encryption and technology works on that particular vessel. So this is very similar, not as dramatic as maybe shooting down a balloon off the coast of, I think it was one of the Carolinas, but it's still a great opportunity for us, and we're taking full advantage of it. I would ask in closing here that you dismiss any kind of media that you're seeing on your social media exaggerating this as some kind of provocation or Cuban Missile 2.0, which is ridiculous. This is actually a great thing for the United States. It's a mistake by Russia that I hope they continue to repeat. I would like to welcome them back to Cuba next summer. Bring more ships and submarines. Bring the Kazan back, because then we can get a trend analysis of year over year of how the Kazan's sounding. That's going to be great. So if you want to know more about these ships, I've posted the Kazan, the Yasen class subbrief here on YouTube. The link's right here. And you can also go to the Patreon to learn more about this frigate. I break them down in detail for about half an hour. Thanks for supporting us. See ya.